Marcus Thompson sat alone in his cramped apartment, staring at his computer screen as another rejection email loaded. The software engineering job market had been brutal. And at 28, he was starting to wonder if he'd ever find someone to share his life with. His friends were all married or in serious relationships, leaving him as the perpetual third wheel at gatherings. Maybe I should just give up, he muttered, closing his laptop with a frustrated sigh. The silence of his one-bedroom apartment felt heavier than usual. Outside, couples walked hand in hand down the busy Seattle streets, their laughter drifting through his thin walls. Marcus wandered to his kitchen and grabbed a beer from the nearly empty refrigerator. As he popped it open, he noticed the strange antique mirror his grandmother had left him hanging on the wall. The ornate silver frame caught the dim light, and for a moment, he could swear he saw something flicker in the reflection. "You know what?" Marcus said aloud, raising his beer toward the mirror. "If anyone out there is listening, I could really use a wife. Someone strong, loyal, and maybe a little dangerous. Someone who won't run away when things get tough." He laughed at himself, feeling foolish for talking to an empty room. "Yeah, right. Like that's ever going to happen. I can't even get a text back from a dating app." The mirror suddenly went completely black, as if someone had turned off a light switch behind it. Marcus blinked, certain he was seeing things, but then the darkness began to swirl, forming patterns that made his eyes water to follow. A cold wind somehow began blowing through his sealed apartment, carrying the scent of old roses and something metallic. Marcus stumbled backward, his beer bottle slipping from his hands and shattering on the kitchen floor. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and a pale hand emerged from within it, followed by an arm wrapped in dark leather armor. The hand gripped the mirror's edge, and slowly, impossibly, a figure began climbing through. First came long black hair that seemed to move on its own, then a face so beautiful it made Marcus forget to breathe. Red eyes that glowed like embers locked onto his, and full lips curved into a predatory smile. The woman who stepped completely through the mirror was tall and athletic, wearing what looked like battle armor from another era. A sword hung at her hip, and her presence filled the small apartment with an energy that made the air itself feel electric. "You called for a wife?" she said, her voice carrying a slight accent Marcus couldn't place. "I am Seraphina Bloodmere, Warbride of the Crimson Legion, Slayer of the Northern Kingdoms, and bearer of the Obsidian Crown. I accept your proposal." Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times before any sound came out. What? Who are you? How did you just come through my mirror?" Seraphina tilted her head, studying him with those impossible red eyes. "You issued a summoning, human. Though crude and unrefined, it reached across the dimensional barriers to my realm. You requested someone strong, loyal, and dangerous. I am all of these things." She stepped closer, and Marcus caught a glimpse of fangs when she smiled. "You are Marcus Thompson, age 28, of the realm called Seattle. You work with computing machines and live alone because you lack the courage to properly court a mate. This information came with the summoning." "Wait, you're a vampire?" Marcus managed to ask, his voice cracking slightly. "Among other things," Seraphina replied casually, as if discussing the weather. "I am also a warrior, a strategist. And now, apparently, you're betrothed. The summoning bond has been established." Marcus rubbed his eyes hard, convinced he was having some kind of breakdown. "This isn't real. I'm hallucinating. Maybe someone slipped something in my beer." Seraphina moved faster than humanly possible, suddenly standing directly in front of him. Her cold hand touched his cheek, and he felt very real. Very sharp nails against his skin. "You are not dreaming, Marcus Thompson. I am here, and according to the laws of my people, we are now bound until death. But I was just joking. I didn't actually expect anyone to show up, especially not a vampire warrior woman from another dimension. The dimensional barriers do not recognize jokes," Seraphina said seriously. "Intent is what matters. And your intent was genuine, even if your belief was lacking. You truly desired a companion. Someone to stand beside you in battle against life's challenges." Marcus sank onto his couch, head in his hands. "This is insane. You can't just decide we're married because I made a dumb comment to my mirror. Serafina sat beside him, her armor making soft, clinking sounds. In my realm, the Bloodmere clan has honored such bonds for centuries. When a worthy soul calls across the void, we answer. It is our way. But you don't even know me. And I definitely don't know anything about being married to a vampire warbride. Whatever that means. Then we shall learn together, Serafina said simply. I have fought dragons, led armies, and conquered kingdoms. Surely adapting to your realm cannot be more challenging than siege warfare. Marcus looked up at her, noting how she seemed completely serious about everything she was saying. Okay. Let's say this is real. Let's say you're actually here, and we're somehow bound together. What happens now? Serafina stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city lights. Now I must learn the ways of your world. And you must learn what it means to be bonded to a warrior of my bloodline. It will not be easy for either of us. She turned back to face him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something vulnerable in her expression. I have spent 3 centuries fighting battles and leading my people. I know nothing of peaceful coexistence, or domestic partnerships. 3 centuries? Marcus squeaked. I am older than I appear, Serafina admitted. But I am not ancient by my people's standards. I am still considered young and reckless, which is perhaps why the summoning called to me instead of one of my elders. Marcus stood up slowly, his mind reeling. So, you're telling me that my stupid joke somehow reached across dimensions and summoned a centuries-old vampire warrior who thinks we're now married? That is an accurate summary, yes. And you're just going to stay here? In my apartment? In Seattle? Serafina nodded. Until we determine how to proceed with our bond. Yes. Though I suspect your dwelling is ill-equipped for someone of my dietary requirements. Marcus felt his face go pale. You mean blood. Among other things, I also require regular combat training, weapon maintenance, and strategic planning sessions. These things keep the warrior's spirit sharp. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city. There's nowhere to do combat training, and I'm pretty sure my neighbors would complain about sword fighting. Serafina frowned, clearly not having considered these practical matters. Then we must find alternatives. Perhaps your realm has designated combat areas? We have gyms, Marcus said weakly, but they're not really designed for sword combat. Then I shall adapt my training methods. Serafina began examining his apartment more closely, picking up objects and studying them with intense curiosity. These artifacts are fascinating. Your realm has progressed far in terms of convenience devices. 1. She held up his smartphone, turning it over in her hands. What purpose does this serve? It's a phone. You can talk to people who are far away, or send messages, or look up information. Serafina's eyes lit up with interest. A communication device? This could prove useful for gathering intelligence about potential threats. Marcus realized she was approaching everything like a military operation. Serafina, Seattle isn't a battlefield. It's just a regular city where people go to work and live normal lives. Every place is a battlefield if you know how to look, she replied seriously. There are always threats. Always conflicts to navigate. The weapons and tactics may be different, but the principles remain the same. As if to prove her point, Marcus's upstairs neighbors began having another loud argument, their voices carrying through the thin walls. Serafina immediately went into what looked like combat mode, her hand moving to her sword hilt. What is the nature of this conflict? She asked quietly. Should we offer our assistance in battle? No, Marcus said quickly. They just argue sometimes. It's normal. We don't get involved. Serafina looked confused. You allow conflicts to fester without resolution? This leads to greater problems over time. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. It's complicated. People have to work out their own problems. We can't just charge in with swords every time someone has an argument. Serafina mused. Your realm has strange customs, but I will endeavor to learn them. The arguing upstairs suddenly stopped, and Serafina relaxed slightly. Perhaps their conflict has reached a natural conclusion. Marcus looked at this beautiful, dangerous woman who had literally stepped out of his mirror and claimed to be his wife. Part of him wondered if he was losing his mind. But another part was oddly excited. For the first time in years, his life wasn't boring. "So what happens tomorrow?" he asked. "Do I call in sick to work? Do I introduce you to people? Do I explain that my vampire wife just appeared through a magic mirror?" Serafina considered this carefully. Perhaps it would be wise to proceed cautiously. Your realm may not be accepting of dimensional travelers, or those with vampiric heritage. That's putting it mildly. Then we shall develop a suitable cover story. I am skilled in deception when necessary. Marcus looked around his small apartment, trying to imagine how his life was about to change. This is completely insane. Yes, Serafina agreed, and for the first time, she smiled genuinely. But perhaps that is exactly what we both needed. Marcus woke up the next morning convinced everything had been a vivid dream, until he found Serafina standing perfectly still by his bedroom window, watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder. "You're still here," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep. "Where else would I be?" she replied without turning around. "Though I must admit, your sun is far more pleasant than the blood-red star that illuminates my realm." Marcus sat up in bed, running his hands through his hair. "Right. Vampire. Don't you burst into flames or something?" Serafina finally turned to face him, and Marcus noticed she looked completely refreshed, despite not having slept at all. "That is a myth perpetuated by your realm's entertainment media. We are weakened by sunlight, not destroyed by it. Though prolonged exposure can be uncomfortable." She gestured to the window. "Your star appears to be less hostile than ours. I may actually be able to function during daylight hours here." Marcus checked his phone and groaned. "I have to be at work in 2 hours. I can't just not show up, but I can't exactly bring you with me either." "You will go to your workplace alone," Serafina said firmly. "I shall use this time to scout our territory and assess potential threats." "It's not territory, it's just a neighborhood. And there aren't any threats except maybe the guy who doesn't pick up after his dog." Serafina looked puzzled. "You allow hostile creatures to roam freely and deposit waste in your domain? It's just a minor annoyance, not a military situation. Poor territorial management leads to larger incursions," she said seriously. "But I will observe your customs before taking action." Marcus got up and started getting ready for work, still feeling surreal about the entire situation. "What exactly are you planning to do while I'm gone?" "Reconnaissance. I need to understand the layout of this area, identify key resources, and determine the social hierarchy." Serafina began examining his clothes with interest. "I will also need to acquire appropriate camouflage for blending in with the local population." Marcus paused while brushing his teeth. "You mean normal clothes?" "Yes. My armor, while practical, appears to draw unwanted attention based on your reaction yesterday." After Marcus explained how clothing stores worked and gave Serafina some cash, he headed off to work with a growing sense of anxiety. His coworkers noticed his distracted state immediately. "You look like you've seen a ghost," said Jenny from accounting during their morning coffee break. "Something like that," Marcus muttered, wondering how to explain that he'd accidentally summoned a vampire wife from another dimension. Meanwhile, Serafina's first foray into modern society was proving educational. She had successfully acquired what the store clerk called casual wear. Jeans, t-shirts, and a leather jacket that somewhat resembled her armor. However, she was struggling with the concept of paying for things without first conquering the establishment. "You simply give them these paper tokens, and they allow you to take merchandise?" she asked an increasingly nervous cashier. "That's how shopping works." "Yes," the young man replied, eyeing her unusual intensity. "And if someone lacks sufficient tokens, they are denied goods?" "Well, yeah. That's kind of the point of money." Serafina frowned, filing this information away for future consideration. The economic system here seemed needlessly complicated, compared to simply taking what one needed through strength or conquest. Her next stop was the local library, where she hoped to learn more about this realm's customs and laws. The librarian was helpful until Serafina began asking detailed questions about the neighborhood's defensive capabilities and whether there were established protocols for territorial disputes. "Are you writing some kind of research paper?" the librarian asked nervously. "I am conducting strategic analysis for a writing project," Serafina replied, remembering Marcus's advice about cover stories. By the time Marcus returned from work, Serafina had compiled what she considered a thorough intelligence report on their immediate area. She had also attracted the attention of 3 different people who were now convinced she was either a method actor, a foreign exchange student, or possibly someone who needed professional help. "How did your first day in the modern world go?" Marcus asked as he found her sitting on his couch, surrounded by library books and handwritten notes. "Your realm is fascinating but inefficient," Serafina replied. "The social structure appears to be based on economic warfare rather than direct combat, which explains the prevalence of passive-aggressive territorial disputes." Marcus looked at her notes, which included detailed observations about everything from traffic patterns to the hierarchical significance of dog breeds as status symbols. "Did you talk to people like this?" he asked, pointing to a note that read, "Elderly female in Unit 3B. Appears to be surveillance coordinator based on window positioning and information-gathering behaviors. I maintained appropriate operational security," Serafina said proudly, though several individuals seemed concerned about my research methods. Before Marcus could respond, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. "Are you expecting someone?" Serafina asked, her hand instinctively moving toward where her sword would normally hang. "No," Marcus whispered back. "Maybe it's Mrs. Henderson from 3B. She likes to check on people." The knock came again, more insistent this time. Marcus approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. A woman in a business suit stood outside, looking official and impatient. "Mr. Thompson, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the Department of Dimensional Security. We need to speak with you about some unusual energy readings from your apartment." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. He looked back at Serafina, who had gone completely still. "There's a Department of Dimensional Security?" he whispered. "Apparently," she whispered back, looking as surprised as he was. Agent Chen knocked again. "Mr. Thompson, we know you're home. We also know you're not alone. We're here to help, but you need to open the door." Marcus looked at Serafina helplessly. She stood up slowly, her warrior instincts clearly kicking in. "Do we fight or negotiate?" she asked quietly. "We definitely don't fight the government," Marcus said quickly. He opened the door with what he hoped was a casual expression. Agent Chen was younger than her voice had suggested, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that immediately looked past Marcus to scan the apartment. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. I'm Agent Chen. May I come in?" Sure," Marcus said, stepping aside. "But I'm not sure what this is about." Agent Chen entered and immediately spotted Serafina, who was standing by the window in a pose that managed to look both casual and ready for combat. "Miss Bloodmere, I presume?" Agent Chen said calmly. "We've been monitoring dimensional breach activity, and your arrival triggered several of our sensors." Serafina stepped forward slightly. "You have systems capable of detecting interdimensional travel?" "We've had to develop them," Agent Chen replied. "Your realm isn't the first alternate dimension we've encountered. Though I must say, matrimonial summoning is a new one for us." Marcus felt like he was in some kind of fever dream. "There are other dimensions? And there's a whole government department that deals with this?" "Mr. Thompson, approximately 15% of missing person cases involve accidental dimensional travel. We've been managing interdimensional incidents for decades." Agent Chen pulled out a tablet and began taking notes. "Now, Miss Bloodmere, are you planning to return to your home dimension? Or are you seeking permanent residency status?" Serafina looked uncertain for the first time since Marcus had met her. "I had not considered the legal implications of my presence here." "Well, you'll need to. Technically, you're here on an undocumented basis. We can help you apply for interdimensional asylum status, but you'll need to go through the proper channels." Marcus sat down heavily on his couch. "So this is normal?" People just summon interdimensional beings and the government has paperwork for it? More common than you'd think, Agent Chen said. Though usually it's accidental. Deliberate summoning requires either significant magical training or extraordinary emotional resonance across dimensional barriers. She looked at Marcus with new interest. Your loneliness must have been particularly intense to breach the dimensional walls without formal training. Gee, thanks, Marcus muttered. Serafina moved to stand beside him, and Marcus noticed it felt protective rather than possessive. What are the requirements for this asylum status? Standard integration protocols. You'll need to demonstrate that you can function in our society without causing disruption, pass basic knowledge tests about our laws and customs, and establish legitimate means of support. And if she doesn't pass? Marcus asked. Agent Chen's expression became more serious. Then we'd have to arrange for her return to her home dimension. The dimensional barriers exist for good reasons, Mr. Thompson. Not everyone who crosses over has benevolent intentions. Serafina straightened up. I am a warrior of honor. I pose no threat to innocent civilians of this realm. I'm sure you don't, Agent Chen said diplomatically. But you'll need to prove that through the proper channels. Can you start classes next week? Marcus looked at Serafina, realizing that their strange new relationship was about to face its first real test. What kind of classes? Integration training, modern technology, social customs, legal system, employment skills. It's actually quite comprehensive. Agent Chen handed them both business cards. The success rate is pretty good for individuals with strong motivation to stay. After Agent Chen left, Marcus and Serafina sat in silence for several minutes. So, Marcus finally said, government-sponsored integration classes for interdimensional immigrants. Your realm is far stranger than mine, Serafina replied. At home, if someone appeared from another dimension, we would either challenge them to combat or recruit them for our army. Here we give them paperwork and ESL classes. Serafina looked thoughtful. I find myself oddly impressed by this approach. It suggests a society confident enough in its strength to welcome potential allies, rather than simply eliminating perceived threats. Marcus studied her profile as she gazed out the window. Are you having second thoughts about staying? She turned to meet his eyes. Are you having second thoughts about wanting me to stay? It was a fair question. 2 days ago, Marcus had been lonely and frustrated. Now he was bound to a vampire warrior from another dimension who was facing government integration classes. It should have been terrifying. Instead, he found himself more interested in life than he'd been in years. No, he said simply. I'm not having second thoughts. Serafina smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Then we shall face these integration challenges together. After all, I have conquered kingdoms. How difficult can government paperwork be? Marcus started laughing despite everything. Oh, you have no idea. 6 months later, Marcus barely recognized his life. Serafina had not only passed her integration classes with flying colors, but had somehow managed to revolutionize the entire program. Her fellow interdimensional immigrants now looked to her as an unofficial leader, and the Department of Dimensional Security had offered her a consulting position. Your tactical analysis of the integration curriculum was brilliant, Agent Chen said, during their monthly check-in meeting. We've implemented your suggestions across all our training facilities. Serafina nodded seriously, though Marcus could see the hint of pride in her expression. The original approach was too focused on assimilation rather than integration. New arrivals perform better when they can maintain aspects of their cultural identity while adapting to local customs. Marcus still marveled at how naturally Serafina had taken to their world. She had discovered that her centuries of strategic planning translated perfectly to project management, and was now working as a consultant for a major Seattle tech company. Her unique perspective on problem-solving had made her surprisingly valuable in the corporate world. Speaking of cultural identity, Agent Chen continued, we've had some interesting developments regarding your home dimension. Serafina went very still. What kind of developments? We've established limited communication protocols with your realm. It seems your disappearance has caused quite a stir among your people. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. They had both known this conversation might come eventually, but he had been hoping it wouldn't happen so soon. "My clan believes I am dead," Serafina said quietly. "When warriors disappear during dimensional storms, that is the usual assumption. Actually, they believe you were kidnapped," Agent Chen corrected. "Your second in command, someone named Valdris, has been demanding information about your whereabouts. He seems to think you've been taken prisoner." Serafina's expression darkened. "Valdris has always been ambitious. If my people believe I am dead or captured, he would use that as an opportunity to claim leadership of my forces." "Your forces?" Marcus asked. He knew Serafina had been a military leader, but she had never gone into detail about what that meant. "I command the Crimson Legion, 3,000 vampire warriors sworn to my bloodline," she explained matter-of-factly. "Valdris serves as my lieutenant, but he has never been content with that position." Agent Chen leaned forward with interest. 3,000 warriors? That's essentially an army. "A small army by my realm's standards," Serafina said. "But effective. We guard the northern borders against the shadow creatures that emerge from the void realms." Marcus felt his world shift again. "You never told me you were commanding an army." Serafina looked uncomfortable. "I did not wish to complicate our bonding process. I thought perhaps I could simply retire from military service." "You can't just abandon 3,000 people who are sworn to follow you," Marcus said, though saying it made his chest tight with fear. Fear that she would leave, that their strange partnership would end before it had really begun. "The communication protocols work both ways," Agent Chen said carefully. "If you wanted to send a message explaining your situation, we could facilitate that." Serafina was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window of the DDS building at the Seattle skyline. Finally, she spoke. "If I contact them, they will demand I return. The bonds of leadership are not easily broken." "And if you don't contact them?" Marcus asked. "Valdris will eventually consolidate power and claim my position permanently. The Legion will suffer under his leadership, and the border defenses will weaken." Marcus could see the conflict in her face. She had found happiness in this world, had built a life with him, but she couldn't simply ignore her responsibilities to her people. "What if there was another option?" he found himself saying. "What if you could maintain leadership without giving up your life here?" Both women looked at him with surprise. "I mean, you've already proven you can work remotely," Marcus continued, warming to the idea. "Half your job here is done through video conferences anyway. Could you lead your army the same way?" Agent Chen looked intrigued. "We've been working on establishing permanent communication channels between dimensions. If Miss Bloodmere were willing to serve as a test case for interdimensional remote leadership, it would be unprecedented," Serafina said slowly. "But not impossible. Many of my strategic decisions were already made from a distance. My field commanders are capable of handling day-to-day operations. You could split your time," Marcus suggested, though the words felt strange coming out of his mouth. "Spend part of the year here, part there, like people do with vacation homes. Except one home is in another dimension." Serafina looked at him sharply. "You would be willing to travel to my realm?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He hadn't really thought about the implications of what he was suggesting. Could I? Is that even possible?" "The dimensional barriers work both ways," Agent Chen said thoughtfully. "Though I should warn you, the process can be dangerous for humans. The atmospheric and magical conditions in most alternate dimensions are quite different from ours. My realm would pose certain challenges for a human," Serafina admitted. "The air is thinner, the gravity is slightly stronger, and the ambient magical energy can be overwhelming for those not born to it." Marcus felt a mixture of terror and excitement at the thought. "But it's possible? With proper preparation and protective measures, yes." Serafina studied his face carefully. "But why would you consider such a thing?" The answer surprised Marcus with its clarity. "Because it's part of who you are. And because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had used that word, despite months of growing closer. Serafina's red eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "You love me?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Marcus said, feeling his face flush. "I know it's crazy. 6 months ago I didn't even believe in other dimensions. And now I'm talking about traveling to one, but I love who you are. All of who you are, including the part that commands vampire armies." Agent Chen cleared her throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should discuss the practical aspects of this arrangement." Over the following weeks, they worked out a plan that seemed impossible, but somehow made perfect sense. Serafina would return to her realm for 3 months to reassert her leadership and establish new communication protocols. Marcus would undergo physical and magical conditioning to prepare for dimensional travel. When she returned, they would work together to manage her responsibilities across both worlds. The night before Serafina's departure, they sat together on Marcus's couch, watching late-night television. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked. "Terrified," Serafina admitted. "Not of returning home, but of how my people will react to this." She gestured between them. Vampire warriors are not known for their acceptance of unconventional relationships. "What's the worst that could happen? They could challenge you to ritual combat to prove your worthiness as my mate." Marcus nearly choked on his beer. "I'm sorry." "What?" "It is traditional for suitors to prove themselves through combat trials," Serafina explained calmly. "Though, given your lack of military training, I would probably be allowed to champion you in the formal duels." "This just keeps getting better," Marcus muttered. Serafina laughed. A sound that had become one of Marcus's favorite things in the world. "Do not worry. I have never lost a challenge combat." "That's reassuring, I think." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Serafina spoke again. "In my realm, we have a saying. The strongest bonds are forged in the fire of impossibility. I never understood what it meant until now." "I never understood." Marcus turned to look at her. "Yeah? What we have built together should not work. A human and a vampire. From different worlds. With completely different backgrounds. By all logic, we should have failed within days. But we didn't." "But we didn't," she agreed. "Instead, we have created something new. Something that exists in the spaces between worlds." Marcus reached for her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "So what happens now?" "Now we prove that love is stronger than dimensional barriers, cultural differences, and government paperwork," Serafina said with a smile. "How difficult can it be?" Quote, "The next morning, Marcus stood with Agent Chen and several DDS technicians around the same mirror that had started everything. The portal was active, swirling with the same dark energy that had brought Serafina to his world. "The communication array should be active within 48 hours, Agent Chen explained. "You'll be able to speak daily once the connection is established." Serafina, back in her armor for the first time in months, looked every inch the legendary warrior she had always been. But when she turned to Marcus, her expression was soft. 3 months, she said firmly. "And then we begin our new life together, spanning 2 worlds." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Serafina stepped closer and kissed him, a gesture that still sent electricity through his entire being. "Do not do anything foolishly brave while I am gone," she said against his lips. "Do not start any wars while you're away," he replied. "I make no promises." With that, she stepped through the mirror and was gone, leaving only the faint scent of roses and metal in the air. Marcus stood there for several minutes, staring at his reflection in the now normal mirror. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely software engineer, with no prospects and no adventures. Now he was in love with a vampire warbride from another dimension, planning to travel between worlds, and somehow involved with a secret government department that managed interdimensional immigration. His phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the message made him smile. "First communication test successful. Miss you already. Try not to burn down the apartment while I establish my authority. S." Marcus typed back. Authority established through superior strategic planning and intimidation tactics, I assume? Of course. Though I may have mentioned my human mate's technological expertise. Prepare to be recruited as a consultant for interdimensional communications infrastructure. Marcus started laughing, earning confused looks from the DDS technicians. Apparently, being in love with Serafina meant his life would never be boring again. 3 months later, when the portal opened and Serafina stepped through with stories of political intrigue, technological revolution, and a formal request from her clan for Marcus to serve as an advisor on human realm strategic technologies, he realized that his joke had given him exactly what he had asked for. Someone strong, loyal, and dangerous. Someone who wouldn't run away when things got tough. He had just never imagined that things getting tough would include interdimensional politics, vampire clan dynamics, and government consulting contracts. But as Serafina dropped her travel bag and pulled him into a kiss that tasted like victory and promises, Marcus decided he wouldn't change any of it. After all, he had always wanted an interesting life. He just never thought he would get one by accident.